I understand that there are still some bars in the country where people, for profit or otherwise, believe that they could ignore the guidelines and the requests and the instructions. There are people who believe that since they don't have to go to work or go to school, the place to be is up in the river in a river line, doing exactly what they've been asked not to do, which is to congregate, and if persons among them are infected, that such persons pose a threat to the national community. This level of irresponsibility is being noted, will not be allowed to continue unabated, because at the end of the day, we do have some heavy hands that we can bring to bear on such behavior. So far, we have been getting the job done without that, and I would like to believe that we can continue without it. For those persons who are going to bars, and for those bars that are opening and encouraging people to congregate and therefore pose a public health threat to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I have today asked the Attorney General and other relevant officers to determine whether posing of a public health threat also poses a threat to the license for those bars, and we are exploring that now and will not hesitate to take action where action is available. Those who have to go down to the river, particularly in Cora and elsewhere, I've asked the relevant minister to ask the relevant local governments to restrict access to the river, and we are asking people to do what is sensible, if not only for your own behalf, but for those to whom you pose a threat. Those who will have a wonderful day in the river line or by the bar, just remember, you could be the person taking the pathogen home to your father, your mother, your neighbor, your sick child, or anybody who didn't have anything to do with your irresponsibility. That's how these things go. So let us continue to do right by everybody else and to do well, because Trinidad and Tobago today is in a much better position than many populations around the world. Think for one moment what's happening in the Bay Area in San Francisco today, where the authorities there have instructed that people stay home for the next 3 weeks because of their situation that they are facing. That might sound nice to some people, 3 weeks of holiday. No, it's not holiday. It's 3 weeks of serious disruption and a threat to life of every citizen. 7 million people being told with no notice, this is your instruction. And of course, such instructions, right now as I speak to you, there is a situation in New York where the mayor and the governor are not seeing eye to eye with respect to a similar instruction for New York. That is where this thing is. And we are not there because we have been fortunate not to have been so infected. And we have done certain things that have given us a little benefit. There is no guarantee that 3 weeks from today, 2 weeks from today, 1 week from today, there's no guarantee. We are working in such a way to minimize the possibility of being in that situation. So let us be observant and be cooperative. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic effect of the actions that we are taking are real for some people. But before I go there, let me as leader of the government, leader of the country, extend our thanks to all those healthcare workers who have been turning up to work, who have been doing what is required to bring comfort and care to those who are affected. Let us give our thanks and acknowledgement to the security services and their families, and all those families who are supporting people who are going and exposing themselves more than we are exposed, but doing what has to be done so that all of us can be protected. I want to thank the business community leadership at all levels, from the conglomerates, large, medium-sized businesses, the chambers of commerce. I can report to you that the committees that we put in place last Monday went to work immediately and have been in full consultation with all of these groups, and the response has been very, very heartening. I wouldn't say everybody, but the vast majority of people who have been contacted for consultation have been very cooperative and have thrown in their lot with the rest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, under the understanding that we are all in this together, and we are going to fight this together, and we'll come out of it successfully together. That is our expectation. So I want to say thanks for the cooperation from the business community and labor. Now, there was an NTAC meeting where the considerations have been put, and we are very pleased that I can say that the vast majority of people are on board with what is required to be done. Our Minister of Finance and our other ministers who met with the business chambers, the reports, and I myself have met with many of them, and we have done well in coming to the positions that we have come to. The Minister of Finance has met with the Central Bank, and even before we are here today talking to you about what is going to happen, some things have already happened. So let me just mention very briefly some of the decisions that are to be taken, and I will ask the Minister of Finance to come in after and go into a little more detail, because the real issue that we had to confront was the issue of preserving liquidity in the economy, meaning that we had to have cash available in the economy for those affected people, from conglomerates to the persons who will lose their job because the bars are closed, because the restaurants are partially closed, because the businesses on Arapita Avenue are not open for the normal day's activity. So the whole spectrum, what we try to do, as I said on Monday, we don't want to leave anybody behind. So we've sought to deal with the effects across the board and what has to be done to make sure that these people and our people, all of us who are affected, that we are doing what is required so that we can all have enough sustenance to take us over this hump to a place, hopefully in the not too distant future, where this thing will be behind us. And at the end of the day, as Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Edward Siaga, said, it takes cash to care. And I would want to add that the cash has to be there. So since we met last Monday, the Minister of Finance and his team and the other people who were involved in this have been working towards coming up with decisions to ensure that money is available throughout the system to preserve the businesses that employ people. So job preservation is a key objective as we respond to the virus. Business preservation, meaning that businesses that are going to lose the ability to perform and be there as businesses to offer job opportunities to employees, that they must be there as healthy businesses after this thing is over, so that we can get back to our normal lives. Families that have now to take children at home, where they were getting school feeding program lunch, that those families now have to find that resource which they didn't have at home. So we have thought all of this through, and some of the ministers will give you a little more information about the detail as we go down into this. But let me talk about the finances. To ensure that there is significant cash available in the system. We're aiming to have a system where there's high liquidity and low interest rates, right away, immediately. And to get that, the conversation between the Governor of the Central Bank and the Minister of Finance have resulted in a reduction in the reserve requirement at the Central Bank from 17 to 14, and a reduction in the repo rate down by 150 basic points, meaning that it's down from 5% to 3.5%. What that has done, because it's already done, is to put $2.6 billion from the bank into the business community. So all persons doing business with the bank in that way, the commercial banks, $2.6 billion is available to them to conduct their business so that these businesses will not be in danger of running out of cash. And of course, you know what that would mean for the persons who rely on those businesses. We've also, the commercial banks will experience a reduction in the prime rate, and I think the Minister of Finance will give a little more detail on that. A significant reduction in the prime rate. That's the rate at which the banks borrow from the central bank. And of course, if that has happened to these commercial banks, the commercial banks will pass that down to those who use the central bank, the commercial banks. And I'll let the Minister of Finance go into a little more detail on that. Now, a lot of people have commitments which will be affected by what is happening with the economy. And some people will not be able to meet those commitments because of the absence of notice and the inability to meet them. So what we have done in talking to the commercial banks is to provide moratoria for 1 month, or in the first instance, or maybe 2, as the case might be, so that mortgages and installments and loans and so could be deferred, not written off, not forgiven, but deferred during this period of emergency. I should say, though, that we are still, as nations, as leaders, as administrators, as managers, we are still not sure when this thing is going to end. The biology is not sufficiently definitive to say this will end in month X or month Y. However, using the best information available, it appears as though the next month or 2, April into May, the rest of March to April into May, would be the period when the ravages of this pathogen would be at its height. So the plans that we have now are for immediate intervention, dealing with that period, and expecting that after that period we'll be in a better place. However, there are other experts who are saying that the full effects of this pathogen on national communities and all their facets could last as long as 18 months. Now, that is an outside arrangement, and let us hope that that forecast is not the kind of forecast we're dealing with. And of course, we're dealing with the one of a shorter period of maybe 2 to 3 months when this will come and be behind us. So the Minister of Finance will say a little bit more about that when he comes to the podium. We've also talked to the banks about interest rates reductions on credit cards, and the Minister of Finance, in seeking to ensure that the monies owed to businesses that could get into difficulty because of their cash flow situation, where the government is a creditor or a debtor, depending on how you look at it, the government owes the business community some significant amounts of money, and those monies are required to the business community for job preservation at this point in time. What we have asked through the chambers is that businesses undertake not to reduce their labor force in this month, into the next month, as a result of the virus. And insofar as we've made that request of businesses, this job preservation that we've asked for, we have undertaken, and the Minister of Finance will go into that detail, to make available to the business community for job preservation payments of substantial monies owed by the government to the business community so that they could carry out that undertaking that we've requested of them, which is job preservation. And of course, maintaining the status quo for workers, if we're able to do that, would be a big achievement while facing down this virus. We, in attempting to give relief to persons who are at the lower end of the earning scale and who may be finding themselves in financial difficulty because other demands are being made on their limited resources. The government playing its part, as I told you last Monday, it will be a sharing of the burden. The government will share some of that burden. The business community will share some of it. Labor will share some of it. And individuals most definitely will be carrying it, those who are specifically affected in some instances. So what the government is going to do is to ask that there be some deferral with respect to mortgage and rental payments for the period April into May from the HDC and the TTMF, where people have mortgages. Now understand, people, if you owe the money and you could pay it. This is a benefit, or should be a benefit only to those who find themselves not being able to pay. Because remember, if you don't pay it and you could pay it, you will have to pay it later on. So if you could pay it now, pay it. If you can't pay it, it is for those who can't pay it that we're trying to provide that relief. We defer to a time when you'll be able to do your responsibility. So that is what we're going to ask those agencies, and to the extent that that puts a problem inside the agency, like at HDC, the Minister of Finance will work with the HDC to ensure that they are not too disadvantaged in getting over the period as a result of this instruction from the relevant authority. We are talking also about something called a liquidity support loan program, which I will ask the Minister of Finance to explain in detail. And we are also talking about using the credit unions, who have thousands of people at the lower end of the earning scale who will be spoken to by the Minister of Finance, where the credit union could be asked to act as an agent for the Minister of Finance towards members of credit unions, where some funds will be available for lending specifically to deal with this response with an interest rate that will be subsidized by the Minister of Finance. So more money will be available to lower income people through the credit union in this period in the short term, and the Minister of Finance will assist in bearing some of that interest cost. And of course, the provision, the Minister of Trade and her team produced a consultative process and period and some very interesting information showing where we are required to provide foreign exchange to purchase materials from external sources. And these are usually, we have in place already an arrangement where the Exim Bank provides funding, foreign exchange, to manufacturers who are requiring to pay in foreign exchange. And NIPDEC purchases pharmaceuticals in a similar vein. We have to ensure that more foreign exchange is available at these venues so that those two areas, manufacturing and pharmaceuticals, are properly funded. Because what's happening now, picture the scene. Our importers, because of our shortage of foreign exchange, and I dare say our poor prioritizing of foreign exchange, meaning that we spend foreign exchange on some things that are not a priority. And in some instances, those that are priority struggle to get foreign exchange because it's a free, open society. Our suppliers, the country's suppliers, through our importers, have put many of our importers at a disadvantage, largely because they have been struggling to pay for the goods that they bring to us. Now that this situation has developed worldwide, even though our people are putting in orders, if they do, who do you think going to get this short supply out there? It will be those companies in those countries that have been paying and are now paying, because the suppliers will say to us, if we've been having trouble getting money from you before this problem, you can imagine what we think about getting money from you after this problem. So we have now very quickly as a government to make sure that our importers of our vital supplies are put in a position to hold a place in the queue out there to get the basics that we need, mainly medicine and food supplies. Get my drift? So the Minister of Finance is going to have to deal with that to ensure that more foreign exchange is available to those who are engaged in the business of putting the order in the queue to get the medicines for the hospital, so that we will get some of what's being provided. This morning, if you are following the international news, you will see governors in the United States saying that their biggest problem as Americans, requiring some of these same things that we require, given what the world situation was, that some big countries were not producing within their borders some of what they need. Being the biggest economy in the world, they are having difficulty buying the items that they need now because the items aren't available. And where they are available, other persons are ahead of them in the queue. So in short, they are suffering from a shortage in supply of the things that they need to fight this virus. Could you imagine that? We are in a situation that is unprecedented. And little Trinidad and Tobago, we have to make sure that we paddle our canoe in this fast-moving stream and try and take our people to shore. That's where we are. So the Minister of Finance will tell you a little bit more in a few minutes. And Tobago, where the bulk of Tobago's economy was tourism. And we were just beginning to get some light in that tunnel in Tobago. We had better arrivals for 2019. We had Jean de Valette that was ensuring that we had good connection between Trinidad and Tobago. We have one of our new vessels due here a little later in the year. We have two vessels under construction. The first one is due here sometime towards the third quarter of the year and so on. So things are beginning to pick up, and then they got hit by this. The hotels in Tobago are now virtually empty. Secretary Joel Jack is here with us this morning. He's been here with us since day before yesterday, working with the Minister of Finance team. So Tobago is very much in the discussions here with us. What the Minister of Finance will have to do as a response to the Tobago situation is to make an allocation over and above what exists there to support persons who borrow from the bank for their tourism project, and the Minister of Finance assists that. We are talking specifically something else. Because the hotels are largely empty, if there is any maintenance and upgrading work that is required to be done on them, and we expect that in the not too distant future we'll be in a better place, the government will make funding available so that hotels and guest houses in Tobago can, at this time of low usage, employ people to do some upgrades and to prepare, so that when we do get back to normalcy, that these rooms and these entities are in a situation to provide a better product, better infrastructure, better product, and to take advantage of what the island has to offer and try and recover from where we've been and where we are at the moment. So the Minister of Finance will, and the Minister of of Tourism will talk to those in the days ahead. I have instructed the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Tourism and the Minister in the Ministry of Finance to go to Tobago in the next few hours, maybe tomorrow or the day after, and meet with the Chief Secretary in Tobago and his team, and meet with the Tobago Chamber of Commerce, and continue these discussions there on this matter. So I'll leave it here for now and let the Minister of Finance join you in a little while, and I will continue to mention the Minister of Education's input to this morning's. The main thing, as you were told at the last gathering, we've closed our schools until April 20th. And immediately the question arises, what happens to the children's exams? Where we are in the discussions on that is that, yes, we are aiming to have the exams. You know, we have our local exam, the SEA, which we use to allocate the school places here in the country. And we have our regional exams, the Cape and CSEC exams outside. The local exam SEA, the Ministry of Education, the education team, they think the exam would go on, but because the peak of this problem is happening at the time when the exam normally would have taken place, it is now expected that the exam will take place a little later down, probably looking at sometime in May. But of course, as I mentioned to you sometime before, we've been told that it's possible that May could be the peak of this. So I don't want to give you a date today, even though they're working with some kind of a which week, which month. But somewhere down there, the exam will take place, the intention being to have the exam so that we can have an exam, which is a selection process, and in time to have it done. So when the term starts in September, we get back to some semblance of normalcy. And of course, the regional discussion is taking place between our minister and the other regional entities, and after regional inputs, they too are looking at having the regional exam, which would be the Cape exam, and other a little later down than its normal time. So in short, the school exams will take place, barring unforeseen circumstances beyond the current unforeseen circumstances. We are expecting that the children will have their exams, but a little later on. And the education minister's team will be working on this and will be reporting to you along the way. And of course, parents, we would like parents to bear this in mind and be mindful of overstressing the children, even in this environment, about let it happen in a structured way without too much of a stressful anticipation. And it's not the first time that we would have interfered with the school year. I had a discussion with the Minister of Education about our time when we did have, in that time, a compression of the school year. I won that argument.
1962.
I don't think it was 1962. The Minister of Education is telling me 1960. I don't know when it was. For him, I know when it was for me, because I distinctly recall being in high school, and there was an administrative change of the school year from 3 terms to 2 terms, because they were administratively changing the school year from starting in January to start in September. And we experienced that, and we had to do the whole syllabus in 2 terms. And he's saying because they were very bright, it was because they were bright and they only had 2 terms. They only needed 2 terms. I don't know what that means. Anyway, we are having to make some adjustments. So let us not get overstressed by that. We're going to get over it. We're going to get it done, and the children will get back to some normal arrangement. Priority: get over this virus that is threatening us in very serious ways. While the children are at home, I would like to appeal to those who can help to assist without gathering, and to ensure that our young people are engaged in positive activity. Most of our young people have cell phones and computers and so on, and the teachers, where they are able to, maintain contact with the students and their parents, and there's a lot of community contact that could be done to keep the children preparing, and so that by the time they get back to an exam soon after the school start, they wouldn't be too alien to what they were engaged in. With respect to our first responders and those people who are actually standing in the gap for us, our doctors, our nurses, our ward attendants, I'm asking the national community, wherever you are, if you know a doctor, you know a nurse, you know a technician, and you could assist them in looking after their children for the day or for the night, or do anything to allow them to discharge their responsibility where they are required to be now, at the hospitals, do that. That would be a great contribution to the nation's effort, because our strength, as I mentioned the last time, our strength is that pool of people who are there standing at the hospitals and the health centers for us. And if we can stand for them at home and in the community, we all will be working on this together. We also have the Minister of Social Development, who will say to you about some of the things that we are committing to do, all of it at the feet of the Minister of Finance, to provide additional support to those who are least able to look after themselves. We are finding and making additional support available so that persons who rely on the social support systems of the country will not be abandoned by any collapse of that system, but will be sustained by an improvement in the system and an expansion of it during this period of emergency. So at this time, I would like to call on the Minister of Health to give us his latest, and then I'll call on the Minister of Finance and after Social Development. So Minister of Health, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media and members of the public who are listening. First of all, I want to jump off and start off where the Prime Minister spoke about healthcare workers. I too, as I have often done, want to thank healthcare workers for their devotion to duty. They have risen to the challenge, and they have shown true patriotism in coming out and doing their jobs in a timely manner. As part of the caring for healthcare workers, I will announce today that I gave the request or order yesterday to come up with a rotation policy for healthcare workers. That rotation policy has been received by me this morning. Others will speak to the details, but it is basically a policy where any healthcare worker, like in Cora, like in Couva, where we have a parallel healthcare system, will not be unduly exposed to the treating of any positive COVID-19 patient for any prolonged period of time. Because we have to learn from other countries where healthcare workers become infected, and that is bad for them and their families, but it also leads to a collapse of the healthcare system. So I want to thank healthcare workers, and I have your back on this by developing a rotation policy. In addition to that, the issue of PPE. Many countries don't have PPE right now. They have run out. I could tell you, I just got notice 5 minutes ago that 24,695 masks, which we ordered about a month ago, have been delivered to NIPDEC as of 10 minutes ago. So unlike other countries, we are in a very fortunate position in having a full supply of PPE to deal with any unforeseen circumstances. Sorry? Yeah, and equipment, yes. Personal protection equipment, including full goggles, full face masks, gowns, the whole works. What I also did as Minister of Health, all of these PPE are normally stored at C40 and Chagaramas. Just in case there's roadworks in Chagaramas and we need to get PPE out, I gave instructions last week that we have a second strategic stock at the Ministry of Health on the 4th floor, which is where my office is, under the control of the chief medical officer and the principal pharmacist. So I have that as a satellite strategic stock. However, if, as the Prime Minister said, a minority of people continue to behave irresponsibly and gather, whether it's in a river or a party, and you have now community spread as opposed to imported cases right now. Our 7 cases are imported. But if a minority of people continue to behave irresponsibly, our best laid plans could be affected. So the appeal from the Prime Minister, the appeal from everyone, is to behave responsibly so that we don't get community spread. The question is to be asked, what about Tobago? Any positive COVID-19 patient in Tobago will be sent to Trinidad and be treated and isolated either at Cora or Couva by the appropriate transportation method. So Tobago is first and foremost in our minds as we plan, as we prepare. We have been planning since January to set up what I refer to as a parallel healthcare system. We don't want what is happening in the United States, Italy, and other countries where their typical healthcare system cannot cope with COVID-19 patients. And to show you how those plans have worked, and I want to thank my co-pilot in all of this, the Minister of National Security. Today, we have received 68 persons from that cruise ship. We have been able to absorb 68 people into a quarantine facility with absolutely no disturbance to our normal healthcare facility. The 68 persons from the cruise ship were received at Piarco, seamlessly transferred with the help of national security. They were fed on the buses, and they were taken to a quarantine facility with absolutely no disruption to normal healthcare delivery. What we are doing, they are already in the facility. We are asking that their relatives take advantage of a drop-off position up at the Sangre Grande Disaster Management Unit, where you can drop off your care packages, well labeled, who the person is, and they will be delivered to your relatives or to your friends at the quarantine facility. That is to give them some sense of comfort that your relatives are being taken care of. We have installed washing machines and everything that are needed there to minimize the need for healthcare workers to go in. Those 68 persons can take care of themselves. They are all well. They are asymptomatic at this point in time. So I want to reassure the public that because of the advanced planning with Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Health, we have absorbed into our facilities 68 persons with no disruption. That is as a result of planning. I also want to alert the population that the Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society has now partnered with the Ministry of Health. Luckily for us, they have 50 persons who are trained in contact tracing, seeing after the vulnerable, and that gives us 50 more people to help with contact tracing. Because as this situation develops, we have to do more and more contact tracing. So I welcome and publicly thank the Red Cross Society for coming on board and lending us 50 more bodies, 50 more, not just bodies, but expert bodies who are expert and have experience internationally trained in contact tracing. So that is what we have been doing at the Ministry of Health. As I said, just to wrap up my thing, we have absorbed 68 persons seamlessly into our healthcare system because we took the time to set up a parallel healthcare system so that our regular services continue unabated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, everyone. Just let me identify the members of my team because it's a team effort. So we have 3 ministers on the Finance Committee team, which will be myself, the Minister of Public Administration and Minister in the Ministry of Finance, and the Minister of Public Utilities. And of course, we have the Prime Minister, who is the leader of the team whom we report to. We also have private sector representation on the team, persons who are acting as a liaison with the main chambers of commerce, the general business community, and the Bankers Association. Based on the work of this team, we have had feedback from the Bankers Association, who have been very cooperative, I must say, and in return for certain actions by the central bank, and this is standard monetary policy. Those of you who follow the United States monetary policy would be aware that some days ago, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates in that country to 0 in order to assist the financial system. So that based on requests from the commercial banking sector, we asked the central bank to convene a meeting, a special meeting of its monetary policy committee, which they did yesterday. And in very quick order, the monetary policy committee of the central bank, and they sent out a press release, which is available on the central bank website, and I'm sure the media has had access to this press release from the central bank. They did 2 things immediately. The central bank is continuing to look at what can be done in the banking sector. I will talk about that in a little while. But what they did yesterday immediately was to reduce the reserve requirement of commercial banks from 17% to 14%. And let me explain what that is. Banks are required to deposit with the central bank a percentage of the deposits of their customers. So let's say a bank has $1 billion in deposits from its customers. Up to yesterday, it was required to deposit 17% of that with the central bank. That is the reserve requirement, and that's a safety measure. The central bank has reduced that from 17% to 14%. What that means immediately is that banks have more cash available to them. And lending rates are immediately affected by liquidity and by the amount of cash available to the commercial banks. So that lending rates immediately should go down based on the relaxation of the reserve requirement. But that is not all they did. They adjusted a rate called the repo rate. The repo rate is the rate at which the central bank lends money to the commercial banks in the event of an emergency or when there's a sudden need for cash by the commercial banks. The central bank will lend money to the commercial banks at the repo rate. That, up to yesterday, was 5%. And the repo rate has a profound effect on all interest rates. The central bank, very quickly, within a 2-hour period, moved the repo rate downwards from 5% to 3.5%, a 30% reduction. And what the banks have told us so far is that they will immediately reduce lending rates by the same amount. But we expect more of them, because although the repo rate is 5%, the prime lending rate, which is the rate at which the bank would lend to an ordinary customer, is 9.25%, so that the prime lending rate is almost twice the repo rate. So now that the repo rate has gone down by 30%, we also expect the prime lending rate to go down by 30%, and that would take it down close to 6%. So we are going to continue our discussions with the commercial banks to encourage them to drop the prime lending rate to 6%. They've already agreed to reduce lending rates by the same amount that the central bank has decreased the repo rate. The central bank also told the commercial banks, and I asked the governor this morning to convene a formal meeting with the banks, that they should reduce the spread between deposit rates and lending rates. Because as you know, right now the typical deposit rate is 1%, 1.5%, 2%, that sort of thing, but our lending rate is 9%. So there's a huge spread of 7% between deposit rates and lending rates. So the central bank is talking to the banks either today or tomorrow, but I expect it will start today, reduce that spread, so that will also ease up persons within the banking system. That's not all. The commercial banks have also agreed to provide moratoriums on loans, mortgages and installment loans. They're calling it skipper payment. So they're starting in the first instance, offering all their customers the opportunity to defer payments on their loan installments and mortgage loans for 1 month. They call it skipper payment. And as we see how this pandemic evolves, it will be on a rolling month basis from month to month. We're starting with 1 month. And all penalties on non-payment of installments will be waived, so that when you skip the payment, you don't suffer because of it. The banks have also agreed to reduce interest rates by 10 percentage points. By 10 percentage points on credit cards. So right now, the interest rate on credit cards is 24%, 25%, depends on whichever bank you bank with. They've agreed to reduce that rate by 10 percentage points, so that if, for example, your credit card rate is 24%, your credit card rate will be reduced to 14%. In other words, by 10 percentage points. We are asking the banks as well that for small businesses, persons who have limits of $25,000 and less, that rate goes down to 10%. Again, to ease up small businesses who may wish to use their credit cards to get cash at this point in time. We've also asked the banks to consider increasing the limit on credit cards for persons so that they can use the credit cards as a form of getting cash. We also went to and that is what the banks have agreed to do so far. We also went to the approach to credit unions. We're still in discussions with the credit unions. I just received a copy of a letter written by one of the major associations of credit unions, where they've agreed to work and collaborate with the government to institute measures that are very similar to what we have asked the banks to do. We haven't reached any level of specificity with the credit unions. Those discussions will continue. But at this point in time, we are seeking to get the interest rate on loans in credit unions reduced from the current more or less 12%, I'm told. Credit unions normally charge 1% per month, 12% per year, and we are seeking to get that down to 6% or less. And we will be discussing this with the credit unions to see what the government needs to do to support the credit unions in order to get that interest rate down on their loans to 6% or less. What we're trying to do is to target everybody who has some form of payment to make at the end of the month. So we started off with the commercial banks, customers of the banks. Now we're moving to the credit unions, where you're dealing with at least 100,000 people. Am I correct, Minister of Labour? It's 100,000 or more. And the one after that will be the money lenders. And the two main money lenders are Island Finance and Unicommerce, who lend money to people to buy household effects, appliances, furniture, and so on. By law, money lenders are allowed to impose an interest rate of up to 24%. So we're looking at that. And we're going to be talking to them to get that interest rate down. And in fact, we need to take a look at that legislation sometime in the future. So that those are the three sources of financing to people that we have dealt with. First, the banks have already started dealing with it. credit unions have agreed to cooperate with us, and the money lenders, I'm also told by the Minister of Trade, has agreed to deal with that. We're also going to ask TTMF and HTC to provide an appropriate moratorium to the customers who experience difficulty during this period. We haven't established the cost of that yet, but we will be asking for an appropriate moratorium in the same way the banks are going to offer their customers the opportunity to skip a payment. We also have a state enterprise called National Entrepreneurship Development Company, NEDCO, and we will be providing funding to that organization to assist its clients in getting soft loans and so on for their projects. That's one of the issues that NEDCO faces right now. It has a funding issue, and we will be providing the necessary funding to NEDCO so that they can proceed to give loans to their clients. We also have gone to the Chamber of Commerce and the TTMF, and we've asked them that we want them to keep people in jobs. TTMA, sorry, why I say TTMF. The Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association and the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce, those two large organizations. And we've asked them to tell us whether they can keep their people in jobs, because this is all about job preservation in this time of difficulty. They have agreed to encourage their members to maintain the status quo for all employees, to keep all employees in jobs for the next 4 weeks, next month. They can't force them, but they say they will use whatever persuasive ability they have to get all members of the Chamber of Commerce and the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturing Association to keep their members in jobs. But of course, there must be a quid pro quo. The government owes all of these people a lot of money. We owe them VAT refunds, income tax refunds, and we owe overdue payables for janitorial services, construction work, supplies, and so on. So what the government is doing is accelerating the payment of arrears and outstanding payables to the business community, whether you are a very small businessman with a small janitorial firm and you provided services to the government, or a small contractor and you've done some work for the government, or you're a large business. We are going to give them a substantial proportion of the money that is owed to them to put them in funds, and this will allow them to keep their employees in jobs. In addition, again through the credit union movement, we are going to institute a liquidity support program, because credit union members are mainly little people who would be worst affected by this problem that we have at this point in time. The objective of the liquidity support program is to provide loan facilities to individuals and small businesses who by and large make up most of the membership of credit unions. So that we are going to set a regime in place in collaboration with the credit unions. I spoke about getting the interest rate down, but we would also look at a form of government securing of these loans and give them a period of time to pay off these special loans, let's say within 12 months of the end of this pandemic. We're also going to increase the allocation of foreign exchange in the system. I'm told that the system we put in place at the Exim Bank for the manufacturers, where we provide them with foreign exchange to boost exports and so on, is working exceedingly well. I was a little peeved to find out that. You know, you find out things in the strangest ways. I'm very happy, though, that the manufacturers have come back and reported to us that the Exim Bank foreign exchange facility is working exceptionally well, and we're going to increase the allocation and look at the limits in that system, because there is a threshold at this point in time to help mainly small manufacturers. And we'll see what we can do to assist medium-sized manufacturers and put more money in the system and so on. And also provide foreign exchange for essential items such as pharmaceuticals, basic foods, and so on. So we're going to be increasing the supply of foreign exchange in the system, because that is critically needed at this point in time. With respect to hoteliers in Trinidad and in Tobago in particular, we are going to create a facility that will allow hoteliers in Tobago and in Trinidad, but Tobago is the primary target at this point in time, to facilitate upgrading of their facilities during this slow period. The hotels are empty. So we are going to assist them to renovate and upgrade their hotels. That would employ people, that will put funding into the system, and at least the hotels will be ready to receive occupants when this thing is over. So those are the things, basically those are the details. I want to commend the banks. They move very swiftly. I want to thank the Central Bank in particular for convening a meeting of their committee almost immediately, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of support from the credit union movement. I've asked the Minister of Tourism, because we're not experts in all of this, so in terms of what we can do for the tourism sector, which is going to be hard hit, we've asked the Ministry of Tourism to make a proposal to us. And again, we've also asked the Secretary for Finance, Mr. Jack, who is with us, to also make a submission on what we can do to help cottage industry, small businesses, and tourism operators in Tobago who will be profoundly affected by this, and we will expect to receive that submission from the Secretary for Finance in the Tobago House of Assembly very shortly, and also receive the submission from the Minister of Tourism. And that is basically what we have done at this time. It's a work in progress. We continue to work for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. I'd like to ask the Minister of Social Development to give us a short presentation of what we're doing at the end of social development issues, trying to help those persons who look to the Ministry of Social Development and its programs for support.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you very kindly, Prime Minister. The committee that I chaired is the Social Support and Job Preservation Committee, and included Ministers Webster Roy, Baptiste Primus, and Sinanan. As Prime Minister said, we examined those persons in the community who are the most vulnerable, and those persons who would probably suffer the fate of either a reduction in their income or become unemployed, especially those persons in the entertainment industry and in those bars that we have asked to be closed. What our committee came up with is as follows. With regard to basic needs, we felt that food support was of extreme importance, and as a consequence of that, those persons who are already on our database, we will top them up in the following way: $150 for households. Those are persons who already have food cards. $150 for households up to 3 persons. $300 for households with 4 to 5 persons, and $450 for households with 6 or more persons. With regard to those persons in the bracket 3 persons, we estimate that that will capture in the region of 14,497 persons or households. In the 300 range with the 4 to 5 persons, that will capture 7,601 persons. And in the 450 range, where there are 6 persons, 6 or more persons, that will capture 2,604 persons. Let me make the point that this is in addition to what the food card that they have in hand already provides, because we feel that they will become even more vulnerable in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We do recognize that there are persons whose children benefit from the school feeding program. So in those circumstances, we will now bring those persons onto the food card system in order for us to ensure that the nutritional needs of those children are maintained, because it is clear that seeing that these children will not be at school, they will not be able to benefit from the school feeding program, and consequently, we must ensure that our children are well taken care of. And so, in conjunction with the Ministry of Education and the nutrition grant system that we have, the nutrition agency, that we will bring these people onto the food support system so the children will be well taken care of. We also have determined that the people who are now on public assistance and disability assistance grants, for a period of 3 months, we will top up those persons also. So with persons who have the public assistance or disability assistance grants, where there is one person, we will top them up by $150, and that will capture 12,960 persons. With regard to the disability assistance grant for children, that will capture 1,056 children. For families who receive the grant for 2 persons, we will top them up by $300, and that will capture 3,415 persons. For families that receive the grant for 3 persons, we will top them up by $450, and that will capture 1,294 persons. For families of 4 or more persons, they will be topped up by $500, and that will capture 752 persons on our database. In circumstances where a family member has been retrenched or terminated and finds themselves unemployed during this period, we will provide income support for a period not exceeding 3 months under the public assistance grant. And where there are children under 18 years, these children will be considered necessitous, and the grant may be extended for a further period, but not exceeding 3 months. In the case of persons who receive rental assistance, and we do have that system in place in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, we are in the process of establishing a policy for an initial period of 3 months, but no more than 6 months for households where a wage earner was retrenched, terminated, or there has become a reduced salary. Let me make the point that in these cases, each person will have to fill out a statutory declaration, so that if we find persons who have come to us who are not really in this circumstance, we will be using the full force of the law to deal with these people. Ladies and gentlemen, essentially those are the areas where we will be assisting people who are the most vulnerable in our society. We will also be providing an additional subsistence grant to our NGOs who have been dealing with the socially displaced, in order to ensure that they can deal with persons who may now come into their system. Essentially, those are the areas that we have dealt with, and we do feel that they will be taken care of at the base of the society. And I'd like to thank my cabinet colleagues for agreeing to these measures that we would like to put in place. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much. Let's get a few words from the Minister of National Security, who might have.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. The first point, I'm really going to address the issues of travel and then some general national security issues, because, of course, as of midnight last night, all non-nationals are now permitted from entering our borders, apart from the Minister of National Security granting an exemption after consultation with the Minister of Health and the medical experts at the Ministry of Health. I'd like to start by just reminding everyone that for the past week or so, if not more, the government has been using persuasion to tell people it is only if you have essential or emergency circumstances you should travel. I want to emphasize that. As we said on Saturday, one of the areas where this virus may be most prevalent are international airports. So we really want to drive home the point, especially in the next 14 days, that you only travel if it is essential or immediate. Of the questions we've been receiving, non-nationals will not be allowed into Trinidad and Tobago except that I grant an exemption. That exemption is only going to be granted in very specific, almost extreme circumstances, medical, healthcare professionals, and those types. So, for example, one of the first exemptions I granted this morning was for a plane flying in samples for testing at CARFA from the region to allow the 2 pilots to be exempted, but we're keeping them in a holding pattern and bay. I raise this because I'm receiving a lot of questions from members of the public. If my spouse is not a national, will you allow him in? The answer is no. Non-nationals means non-nationals. You marry that with what we're saying, essential and emergency travel. And I apologize, but the only way we will be able to have a fighting chance at containing this is ensuring that we are not allowing more people than are absolutely necessary in. So whether you have a spouse or a child who is not a non-national, I'm asking you to stay put. I am not going to be granting exemptions in those circumstances. We have also been discussing in the last 24 hours with the international airlines that fly here whether their crew will be allowed to disembark. Again, we have taken the position, the answer is no. So they will either super crew, which means fly with another crew on board so they can just take the aircraft and leave, or do turnarounds. The next 14 days are critical. Permanent residents as citizens are what we consider nationals. So once you have that permanent resident stamp in your passport, you're considered a national. We also have some people who are nationals that are wanting to travel on other passports. So you may have a US passport and then turning up saying, well, I'm a national of Trinidad and Tobago, and wanting to produce a birth certificate, etc. Understand that in the prevailing climate, it is very difficult for the staff at airline counters all over the world who may be flying to Trinidad to determine whether you are Trinidadian or Tobagonian on the basis of other documents other than a passport. So at this stage, I support those airlines that take the position, unless you have a Trinidad and Tobago passport, they cannot determine whether you are national or not. National security, as you heard the Minister of Health say, are playing a supporting role. We had a successful operation. I'd like to thank all of them, and our work has just begun in continuing what it is. One of the members of the media was just asking me that initially we said 75 people on the cruise, how come it's only 70? Understand that information is coming at us initially from persons on the boat, and as it turned out, 68 people came in today. That is the correct number. It is not that there are some others we have taken to other places. We had an operation in place. As soon as they landed, we looked after them, took them off of the plane, straight along with the Defense Force to a facility. The facility was already prepared by the Ministry of Health, and we continue to do so. We are securing these facilities, and we are helping the people who are in quarantine. I had a conversation with the Chief Medical Officer this morning. His committee, along with the police and the Defense Force representatives, took a decision yesterday. The CMO, the Chief Medical Officer, is going to use the Quarantine Act, and persons who he has put in self-quarantine, we are going to be patrolling via the use of the police and the Defense Force to encourage them to stay in self-quarantine. And again, it comes down to personal responsibility. Please, if you have to self-quarantine, keep yourself in quarantine. It doesn't mean going out, mixing with your family members who may then go out into public and these types of things. We are also looking at other facilities. A successful site visit has been conducted this morning, Prime Minister, with the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and the Ministry of Health personnel of the Napa facilities, and we are immediately putting that into another facility that we can utilize. We've been told there are between 50 to 60 rooms available, and as we speak right now, they are being operationalized for our use to really keep persons out of the capacity area of our medical facilities in the first instance. So we give the assurance that Ministry of National Security continues to do what it has to, and from the travel perspective, also with cargo vessels coming in, I've instructed that the crew not allowed to be not allowed to disembark the cargo ships. We will do what needs to happen to get the goods and whatever supplies on these ships off, but we're not allowing the crews to disembark either. Thank you.
A big concern is that we are only confirming important cases because CARFA is only testing those who had a travel history. So therefore you won't get any community cases because they're only testing people who went abroad and had a travel history. And the concern is that we aren't getting a real number of confirmed cases. So that is not entirely true. We test everyone who is a suspect case. So for example, let's take the first case. We would have done his contact tracing, especially his primary contacts. All of those people would have been tested. Everyone is asking about why don't we test 1.3 million people? So let me go over it again. The tests will only give you a true positive when a person is symptomatic. If you test randomly and you test 1.3 million people, you will get what is called a negative test, but it will be false because there is not enough viral load in the person to give you a true positive. We are following the guidelines of WHO, and I want to give the nation the assurance we test all primary contacts of every suspect case.
So this claim that CARFA is rejecting samples that local medics send where there's no travel history, is there any truth to that?
Yes, because you take on tests on board based on clinical symptoms and travel history. So for example, we are getting many people because of Sahara dust who have respiratory problems. It does not indicate that you have COVID. So it's a mixture of the clinical judgment of the physicians, the travel history, and your proximity to one of the positive cases, or even if you're a secondary contact. We are following WHO's guidelines.
Joel?
You had mentioned the sort of moratorium on rentals in the state housing sector, as it were, during the pandemic period. What about those who are renting, who may fall in that category in the private housing sector?
Well, as you know, we don't have control of that. The government has control at the HDC and to a lesser extent at TTMF. So what we've done, where we have control, we intervene, and we are, well, appealing to landlords on the outside to be understanding of their valued clients who are their tenants. And I've said earlier on, tenants who can pay, please pay. If you ask for a deferral and you get it, it means that all you have done is put your payment down the road for a bigger payment. So those who can pay ought not to try to play smart, but those who in genuine difficulty, we are expecting that there be some element of forbearance from the landlords. Because as I said earlier on, we are all in this together. And landlords have to understand that if they have tenants who are victims of the situation, under some element of understanding, those people who are already getting support from the state, as Minister Robinson just mentioned, rent assistance, if they get caught up in this, there is some element of assistance from the government, as she mentioned earlier on.
You mentioned the issue of river lines. I'm wondering in terms of beaches, especially going into the weekend.
Anywhere where you are violating the common sense advice, which is do not congregate. In fact, even home in your house. If you have a big family, as some of us have big families, and they all want to come around for a lime, please discourage it. If you congregate, the virus is not going to say, okay, they're only liming, I wouldn't infect them. What you're doing, one person in the family, in the household, in the yard might be carrying the virus. Give ourselves the best chance by separating so the virus doesn't move from A to B to C to D. If you do anything anywhere which brings people so close that their bodily fluids can be exchanged, and also if you don't pay attention to cleaning the surfaces that they interact with, you don't sanitize, then the chance of us getting infected is better. What we are trying to do, all of this that we're talking about, what we're trying to do is to minimize those chances, right? So if you decide that you want to go on a river, Lime, it doesn't matter which river it is, whether it's Cora or Valencia, it doesn't matter. What you're doing, you're congregating and you're creating the opportunity for the virus. Let us be the nation that we're a small nation. I just told you, 7 million people in the Bay Area in Frisco. Is there, the mayor is trying to deal with that. We are 1.4 million people, that's our entire nation. So let us be a model in responding sensibly to this virus. It can be done. I know it's hard because I find myself lots of times I have to, you know, it's automatic to extend your hand to shake somebody's hand. We say handshaking is a no-no, right? Then, of course, you know, you want to greet somebody sometimes, you have to remember, no kissing. I have a complaint about my colleague here. Talking about, and we're not talking about trying to penalize anybody. We're saying be aware of what we're talking about, be a part of it, and be focused enough to not do the things that could give us the chance of you getting infected, because your infection is my infection. Because if you're carrying the virus, I don't know where you're carrying it. It might be to the next bus. You might go on the bus, you might go in the taxi, you might go in the grocery. So we are all exposed to what all of us will be doing. That's what it is.
Minister, just one other thing.
Wait a minute, let's hear. Yeah.
You did speak about the security personnel. So I'm just wondering if you or anyone at the head table can give a sense for the police, firefighters, even the prisons officers, what specifically is being done in terms of their protection as they are also on the front line.
You all should recall that a few weeks ago, we actually addressed this issue when the Interministerial Committee was set up under the chairmanship of the Chief Medical Officer. We put onto that committee the police service, the defense force, we added fire service. This week, and last week, Friday, I chaired a meeting, I think it was yesterday, another one, and these issues have been addressed. So they do have the PPE gear, but of course the PPE gear isn't to be distributed to everybody. The police, I'm happy to say, the first service to produce protocols and policies to deal with COVID-19 was actually the prison service. And those protocols address social distancing in the areas, how to deal with persons coming in to visit the prisons. They have already begun the scanning, etc. With the police service, they also, by Monday morning, had produced for me and had already implemented a policy and procedure that is very proactive. So in police stations, where you stand back from the counters, police stations now have running water and soap for persons coming in to wash their hands, etc. All of these things have been put into place. With the PPE gear, they told me that they have the gear, the executives have the gear, and then the executives in the police service will determine how that is distributed on an needs basis at this stage. The Commissioner of Police informed us yesterday that the police service are about to get, of their own volition, over 7,000 face masks, and these are some of the initiatives that are being taken. The Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force have access to the hazmat suits, go down, that type of PPE gear. So we are looking, the fire services as well, we are looking at all of these things. ODPM also has stock, and I've asked them to distribute to the services as well.
Minister Vial Singh, the CMO took a decision to use the Quarantine Act. Are there instances of people who are in self-isolation, roaming in public places and probably spreading the virus to others who are healthy? And what measures have you all been putting in place to monitor these individuals? Okay,
so that's a very fair question. So under the Quarantine Act, the Section 3B, the Chief Medical Officer is the quarantine authority. It's a one-man authority. So whomsoever is the Chief Medical Officer is the quarantine authority. Under that act, he has the power to impose a $6,000 fine for anyone breaking quarantine. We have taken that decision that anyone caught breaking that will be fined. In addition, right now, to the best of my knowledge, based on the information I have from the CMO, there is no one under quarantine who is, as you put it, roaming the streets. What we have also decided to do with the help of the Minister of National Security, we will be making drive past some of these homes to ensure that persons under quarantine are in fact under self-quarantine. These are all the measures we are taking under the Quarantine Act, with the Chief Medical Officer being the quarantine authority. Sure.
How many are under self-isolation as we speak?
I don't have an accurate figure, so I wouldn't like to quote. The Chief Medical Officer is in charge of that, but I can get it for you.
While we are at this stage in the press conference, I want to mention that Cabinet took a decision this morning to... Yes, while we're on this, I want to mention that a decision taken this morning, again, with respect to being focused on what the objective is, that the number of persons that we consider to be a gathering is beyond 10. So we're talking about gatherings of 10 or more being unacceptable. And we are responding in this way because we are learning from others who are ahead of us in the life of the pathogen. So 10 or more than 10 persons we consider to be a situation that is unacceptable.
Will we be teleconferencing next week, Thursday as well?
Well, let's put it like this way. Yeah? This is not. There are exceptions, because we still want to continue living some semblance of normalcy. I've been advised by some people to shut the entire country down, because they have accepted that if you, as a shutdown and nobody going anywhere, the virus can't go anywhere. But that is not a feasible position, because if we shut the entire country down, everybody, and then police doesn't go to work, nurses don't go to work, doctors don't go to work, no, that is not a response. That is just pure chaos and unacceptable. So there's some element of risk to which some people in the population are exposed. It's like in a normal situation. Some persons determine they want to be a teacher, some a lawyer, some a farmer, some a soldier. And then the soldier, something might happen where soldiering brings it to a life and death situation. There are people who, in discharge of their own, let's take TNTech. TNTech workers, they're going to work. Our power supply is still on and going very well. WASA workers, they're all going out to work. So we can't talk about shutting down the country. What we have are protocols for when you come out there, how you behave, who you interact with, how many of you can interact, and so on and so on. So the country is still functioning, but with some certain number of restrictions in very many areas. In short, elements of different exposure, and we're managing risk.
What about Parliament? Other parliaments have shut down.
Some people believe that it should be shut permanently. But no, we are cognizant, the same way we are in here, a little above the number recommended, but well spaced out. In Parliament, there are a few of us in the building. Is that? Yeah, so ideally, we are gathering more than we should. We are a little spaced out in there as well. But we've taken steps to, we have session of Parliament on Friday, which we hope will be very short, because we are just going to make a couple of minor amendments to ensure that some things that require to remain legal, remain legal. So the government will be very, very short, and I trust that our colleagues on the other side would understand that they would need to be short. Today, there was a vote being taken in the U.S. Senate today, and the chamber was empty, and you were invited to come in and vote and leave. So that is where it is reached. Don't stand up and talk to anybody. Come in and vote and go. So we are going to meet on Friday, and we hope we'll be there. Very briefly, in fact, our leader of government, business, and leader in the House, and I hope the other side, we meet on Friday morning, and we hope that the Senate can meet on Friday afternoon, so we get very quickly in and out, and then the Parliament leader of government business tells us we will take the 2-week break and come back after and hope to be in a different place. Wait a minute, let's hear Anthony over here, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I wanted to get from the Minister of Finance and Minister of Social Development, what is the proposed increase in expenditure for the number of social development projects outlined, and for Minister Ingbert's
Minister of Finance.
And also, what is the quantum of increased foreign exchange that he proposes to put on the market?
We had already planned to do VAT refunds by way of tradable bonds in the amount of $3 billion. If we take bills owed to suppliers, contractors, etc., say another $2 billion, we're looking at $5 billion. With respect to the social security measures, those have not been quantified at this point in time, but I think based on my rough calculations, that would come in at less than $100 million. In terms of foreign exchange, again, we haven't quantified that, but maybe we're looking at additional injection of $100 million in the system.
Is there going to be any sort of rationing of the foreign exchange? Because the Prime Minister talked about not prioritizing and spending using foreign exchange for things that we do not need, but ensuring that in this instance there is foreign exchange for the things that we do need. So would there be some sort of rationing or some sort of a system of management that would see some people not getting foreign exchange and others?
Well, at this point in time, it's what's called an honor system. The central bank provides foreign exchange to the commercial banks, and they are expected to use their judgment and their discretion in terms of apportioning foreign exchange to their customers for essential items first and non-essential items second. With this new injection of foreign exchange, we believe at the level of the cabinet that any additional foreign exchange that goes into the system should be directed to essential items in the first instance, and non-essentials should not benefit from any additional injection of foreign exchange.
Let me just mention something. We have to accept that we don't have all that we need or could use. And common sense would require that we use good sense in making best use and wise use of what we have. One of the things the Minister of Trade and her team produced for the cabinet was a breakdown of the 2019 demand for external purchases. And I'm not being facetious here, but one of the items on the list was water. $3.5 million in water. Now, I don't know who makes a living doing that, but it might be a good living. But frankly speaking, in an emergency situation, you really think that Trinidad and Tobago should be importing anybody water? Having to find foreign exchange to do that? As a matter of fact, the Parliament at one time bought water from somebody, and it came in, we wanted bottled water, in glass bottles because we were pushing recyclables. The water came in glass bottles, fine, so we solved that problem. Bottles are glass and renewable. But then it was imported from somewhere. So we had to stop. And now we carry our cup to Parliament and go buy a cooler, and we still get our water or something like that. We're not rationing it, but we are ensuring that the essentials, especially the bare essentials, are met. And by increasing the amount of the available foreign exchange to the Exim Bank, that in itself is prioritizing, because at that location, the money that goes there, we are pretty much ensuring that our manufacturers or persons who import medication that we don't make in this country and so on, that there's foreign exchange for that. That is as best as I can explain it.
Mr. Delsing, we noticed a drop-off in information after the first confirmed case was announced. Now, I know the CMO said you won't be naming countries, especially our CARICOM partners, but Jamaica is still providing that information. And the public here is feeling like they deserve a bit more than a media release sent out between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. just updating them on numbers. Now, you all did promise transparency. Is there a rationale for why we're just being told 5 is now 7, 7 is now 8?
Okay. The CMO made the point that the entire world is affected and infected by COVID. If we take the position of naming countries, and you have the Prime Minister here, after this COVID issue is done and dusted, we still have to have diplomatic relations with countries. We still have to export our products to Jamaica. We still have to do relations with the United States. It may be a good short-term thing, but at the end of the day, what the public should be comforted for, that we are being transparent. Whether I get a positive case at 2 o'clock in the morning, I alert the public. That is transparency. That is accountability. We are not hiding any information. The last few cases, we got the positive results in the night. And the CMO and I and CAFA will be up in the night, receiving these positive cases and send out a press release immediately to alert the public during the night. We are not waiting 12 hours for the following day. That is accountability. That is total transparency. And naming countries at this point in time is irrelevant, because almost every single country in the world has COVID, and we have to live with these countries afterwards.
We're not naming countries, but for the first case, you gave us a detailed history of arrived in the country at this time, felt symptoms at this time, was tested at this time, and then sent to quarantine at this time. And
so you would like that level of detail?
We would love some more details on that.
We can arrange that.
And,
sure.
I mean, even in South Korea, they have apps that show you where confirmed cases are in the country. They show a red dot on the screen so that people would know, okay, you know, they may take that opportunity.
So right now, we are plotting that into our GIS system, and we will have a media event to show you how we are plotting that onto a GIS system to show you contacts and so on. So you are spot on, and we will do that.
Let me just say something here. It is not the government's intention to hide any information. We have been and will continue to be as open and as transparent as possible. But let's just understand that there are consequences to every action that we take. In Grenada, a few days ago, there was an instance, quite innocent instance. They named they got their first case. And in being transparent and open, giving as much information, and I'm not here making a case for preventing information, I'm just telling you what happened. The person ended up in St. Lucia, I think it was. Or the person came from Grenada. However it was, but the person was in a hotel in Grenada. Grenada has a lot of hotels. People were not satisfied, or may not have been satisfied, by being told that the person came and was in a hotel in Grenada and was tested and found. They named the hotel. And you know what happened after that? Staff in the hotel started being denied transportation to go home. People wouldn't take them in a taxi to carry them home. One person claimed to have been sprayed with disinfectant. And they started to treat the hotel as a place to be scorned. That is the reaction. Now, the question you have to ask, could it have been sufficient to say a hotel? Because it didn't matter which hotel, but by naming the hotel in that way. Now, Korea, when the thing was all over the place, I can say, nothing to hide. But we are in a situation where we're giving you as much information, and I don't think that we should be unmindful of the fact that there could be consequences if information that could be used to worsen the situation. For example, yes, a member of parliament is in the parliament putting out on Facebook that she's locked down in parliament with people from the government who, ministers who have traveled and should be quarantined. Now, that is not information, that is mischief. And what that does, it worsens our ability to deal with the situation. So we will give you all the information that we have that we think is relevant and available. And as the minister would say to you, the government is not doing the testing, but CAFA is doing it. And CAFA's data is what we will have and we'll pass on to you. So if we say it is 5, it is 10, it is what CAFA has said in terms of how many, who they've tested, what they've tested. So far, we've got 5 confirmations.
With that then, Prime Minister and Minister Diazing, what is your view on people on social media who have revealed the identities of some of these patients?
Yeah, what is your view? If it was your family, would you accept, would you like that? If it was you, would you like that? And that's the answer. Do not unto others that which if done unto you will cause you pain. That is all we can ask for. That's called the golden rule. Persons who do that, as I say, we as a nation, we are better than that. Think if that was your sister or your mother, would you like that to happen? That's why before this virus was, you couldn't go into a hospital ward and take a picture of a person on a bed. It's forbidden. It's forbidden because those things can have consequences for the people who are the victims. And you are further victimizing them. It's not social media, it's just you being nasty. That's what it is. And we have to understand, as you say, we are our brother's keeper, and we're in this together. Why do you want to name somebody? What value is that, other than you want to make mischief? Would you like that to happen to you? Or any member of your family or your community? It's not necessary. We tell you of an incident, of an instance, a statistic. I think that is enough.
To the Health Minister, you mentioned earlier care packages could be dropped off for the people who were brought in today. Relatives are asking if there's any more detail with regard to when they can drop off and exactly where.
So I did say, and I welcome the opportunity to repeat it. I said the care packages can be dropped off on the Eastern Main Road in Sangre Grande at the Disaster Management Office of the Eastern RHA. You drop it off by 3 p.m. of any day, and the ERHA will transport it to the persons. However, there will not be a two-way traffic. In other words, nothing will be allowed to leave there to come back home like clothes or whatever. So there will be a one-way traffic flow from the disaster management unit at ERHA to your loved ones. We will try to make every effort to make their stay there as comfortable as possible, but there's going to have to be some degree of self-reliance. In other words, they may be responsible for making up their own beds. This is not a hospital where your beds are made up for you, or a hotel where your beds are made up for you. You will have to do your own laundry. Meals will be sent in. We are going to make every effort to make your 2-week stay there as comfortable as possible under quarantine conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to end on this note. There are 2 points I want to raise here, which hopefully will indicate to us that it's not all right. Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to end on this note because we've been going for a while. I've received the following communication from the government of China, and I think I should share it with you. It says, once again, I wish to express our high appreciation for your timely support and kind donation of face masks to the People's Republic of China when we were in dire need of those. This timely donation is yet another testimony to the strong bonds and true friendship between our two countries and peoples. Trinidad and Tobago, at the time when Wuhan was identified with this problem, and it was a Chinese problem at the time, Trinidad and Tobago had responded by providing, how many? 13,600 face masks to the Chinese. The Chinese have responded saying, now that the coronavirus has reached the shore of Trinidad and Tobago, China wishes to reciprocate the same kindness by providing some medical supplies in need. We have mobilized resources both from the public and private sectors in China to urgently provide the following items and services to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. 1. 15 sets of body temperature measurement systems for airports, seaports, and other applicable venues. These body temperature measurement systems will be urgently shipped to Trinidad and Tobago. 2. Real-time fluorescent RT-PCR kits for diagnosis of COVID-19 for 4,000 persons. You may recall that you were told by the minister that CAFA has for us 3,000. Is that for Trinidad and Tobago or for the region? For the region. For the region. China is offering Trinidad and Tobago these test kits, diagnostic kits, for 4,000 for Trinidad and Tobago. These kits will soon be shipped at strict low temperatures, utilizing dry ice to Trinidad and Tobago. 3. Protective gears like masks, gloves, coveralls, goggles, quantities to be confirmed. And 4. Facilitation of technical information sharing, medical expertise sharing, and video conference with medical professionals in China, should it fit the needs of Trinidad and Tobago. And they continue to say that this is the level of cooperation that we have established and endured and can expect. We have our friends outside the United States, the United Kingdom, and in this matter of COVID, everybody out there should be able to count on everybody else. I also want to read for you a paragraph from a letter which I got this morning from one of our major conglomerates who indicate to us, saying, we have heard your call and certainly taking this very seriously and want to assure you that we are carefully following government's guidelines and taking precautionary steps to do what we can to prevent the further spread of the virus. We agree with your sentiments that we are all in this together, which ties into our company maxim, together we are family. As a matter of principle, and with my personal commitment to the health, safety, and security of our 6,000 employees, as well as our associates, consumers, customers, and communities, I issued a message across the group emphasizing preservation of life as our #1 priority wherever we operate. Since the outbreak of the virus, we have been bolstering precautionary measures in all our facilities. That from one of our major conglomerates. I tell you this so that you can understand that it is possible for us to behave as expected and to get the best result under these very trying circumstances. I thank you for your assistance in informing the public and informing us in the government as to what is going on so that we can do better than we are doing now. And we hope that this, with God's blessing, will not be too long and that our shoulders will be strong enough to bear this burden. Thank you very much.